Hello, I'm Douglas Arner, and in this month's issue of Looking Back, Looking Forward, I want to talk about inflation and central banks. Over the past few weeks, we have seen some incredible changes in financial markets all over the world, most particularly in the UK, but really all across the world. And if we think about this focus on inflation, rises in interest rates, why is this happening and what is it likely to mean? Really, our starting point is what is one of the biggest functions of a central bank? And essentially, the idea is that monetary stability, a trustworthy, usable monetary instrument, as we've talked about so many times, is a vital public good. And high levels of inflation can erode the trust in that monetary instrument and eventually undermine not only finance, economic activity, but entire governments and societies. And of course, in the context of a world of fiat currencies, we are at much greater risk from the standpoint of inflation. And as a result, we have developed these mechanisms of independent central banks, which we task with mandates to assure the stability and trustworthiness of money in order to effectively underpin our economies and underpin our societies. If we think about the tools that those central banks have, they primarily have tools relating to the supply as well as to the cost, the amount of money, as well as the base interest rate that the central bank may lend money to participants in the financial system. And in the context of inflationary concerns, we may see central banks working on both of them. And I think today, we are looking at big discussions about high inflation rates. And the question is, where did it come from? Well, one is certainly a monetary response to COVID beginning, particularly in March of 2020. Central banks dramatically reduced interest rates, increased the money supply to keep the financial system, to keep the economy functioning, as we've talked about so many times over the past 2 years. But likewise, as we've discussed, particularly this year, a range of geopolitical factors, in particular, the conflict in Ukraine, has driven up energy prices and food prices. And in turn, energy and food is necessary for everything else, which has then driven up prices as a result. A third factor coming out of COVID has really been around supply chain issues, sometimes as a result of labor concerns, sometimes as a result of different planning, sometimes as a result of geopolitics. And what all of this says is that when we are trying to figure out how to address these challenges, we need to use different tools. So governments should be using higher rates of inflation and seeking to rein in the monetary supply to reduce the negative impacts of the monetary aspects of inflation. But at the same time, from the standpoint of those exogenous costs, the shock of energy and food prices, really governments need to be stepping in and putting money forward to help people deal with these. Why? Because these are not likely to be continual increases. These are large one-off increases that need to be adjusted to. And our final group, really the supply chain issues, the geopolitics issues, this is about restructuring economies going forward. And once again, this is where governments need to be focusing from the standpoint of spending, is not on handouts, but on infrastructure, on education, on research and development to improve productivity and economic functioning, as well as rebalance quality over the longer term. And so when we think about what is going wrong in the world of finance today, in some ways, it is perhaps too much of a focus on the interest rate side, perhaps too much of a focus on the energy side, and not enough focus on the investment side. Going forward, we need to think about both how individual countries can make the right balance, something that I think we can say the UK got very wrong in the past couple of weeks, and also how we can deploy international institutions and organizations like the IMF, World Bank, and others to try to address these different challenges, recognizing that inflation does not come from a single source, but from a variety of different directions, each of which requires different policy prescriptions.